Are you pumped? Are you excited?
Oh, I'm pumped. This is this is the epic culmination of everything that I have been working on for decades.
And it's happening on Zoom.
That's right. It's all happening on Zoom.
Yeah.
Here we are. Here we go, state.
This is the future.
Yep, Zoom is the future.
I hope not.
Yeah, honestly.
I like the fake background over there.
It's not fake, really. It is a real picture. I took it, so it's not fake.
I could put a fake background on. Well, I don't want to. I have too many screens that I could switch between with my advanced streaming technology.
The fake background won't do this, for instance. See my hand? I'm holding something, but it won't.
Yeah.
Professor Bjork, hello.
Is that?
Hello.
There's Bob Bjork. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Doing well. Looking forward to this.
Oh, definitely. I'm excited. Oh, there's Professor Pruitt.
Hi.
Okay, in that case,
Hey,
we still have 2 minutes, so
lovely.
we can wait till a few more people. They're 12 now.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
here we are. Yeah, I'm sure a few more people are gonna show up in the next couple minutes. But this is it. So, I've never done a thesis defense before, so I'm going off of what I've been told. So, should I begin?
Well, you still have a minute.
All right, cool.
And technically, we introduce everyone to everyone. So
Oh, okay, cool.
that in a minute or so.
All right, yeah.
Take it easy, take a breath, and then.
Definitely.
So it is 3:30. So thanks everyone, 12 people for showing up. That's wonderful, supporting Robbie. And so the way this will go is that Robbie will talk for about 30 minutes, and then the committee, consisting of Bob York, Catherine Pruitt, myself, will ask questions, and then we'll open it to everyone that's here or on YouTube. So you want to get started? Go for it.
All right. So, this project is a language, but it is also much more than a language, considering that this language that I've been making is the language spoken but in the fictional nation of Elfwant Casanosha, which is part of a world that I have been gradually developing since I was literally 7 years old. So I had a lot of content that I was able to compile into the full book format, and I'm going to get it printed out into a book format. Let's see. I'm gonna try and share my screen real quick so that we can open up the book itself. Let's see. Share screen 1. Yep. All right. Cool. Is it working?
Yep.
All right. So here we have it. The book, it's called The Grammar of the Ojun Language, but it's also history, phonology, orthography, syntax, morphology, and cultural information. And even the history section and the cultural information section is even still an abridged version of everything that I've created throughout my childhood. And that's saying something, considering when you look at the contents, the geography and the history section goes basically from page 9 to like page 82. I wrote a good 54 pages of this, all just on the history of the Faunal Peninsula, where the nation of Elfwonk exists in this alternative history future Earth, like a million years in the future or so. It is a lot. I made a lot of maps for it, showing the dispersion of different language groups in different countries. In that area, I'll go over to it here. first, where do we have it? So, geography, I show, like, just a basic map of what the peninsula looks like based on all the maps that I drew when I was a child. Like, this area is generally the shape of my backyard as how it existed whenever I was little. Whenever we'd get a hose and fill up the lakes and make the country, we'd make the buildings out of dirt and stuff, and everything about it leaks into the culture, and that leaks into the language itself too. As in, like, the fwonk, the fwa, in that the root fwa means dirt. And obviously the whole dictionary and stuff is included in this book too. We'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, so I go into detail about the mountain ranges, the volcanic activity, the 3 zones of water bodies that the people consider in like political organization and such. The names, the English names for all the bodies of water, because obviously before this, the names existed in my language, they had like names that we created, my friends and I created whenever we were little. So there's all these names that I eventually, used as inspiration for, and then also backwardly composed into the actual words that they would use to call these locations in the language. And then a lot of these came from an honors contract that I did with Bob, doing the transcription, what is it called? The transliteration styles of the phonologies of English compared to ojun, which at the time was still called Miarwakatao. There's also a section on all the names. I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, so here's all the names of the mountain ranges, and I go into detail on that. The ecosystems, which are definitely very important to the culture and the language, because most of it is like either deserts or swamps. Yeah, so then the history section starts off with this map showing how all the languages developed from this Proto-Cern Kahilan language family that was around what is like the modern day, like modern Earth's equivalent of like the Midwest, like maybe Arkansas or so. And then the languages kind of spread out from there and expanded into all these different directions, including down to the Faunal Peninsula down here. And the language gradually evolved from that. So there are other languages in this world, obviously, including one that I'm making in Ellie's Conlang class right now, but that's from a separate language family, and that's spoken up here in the north. But yeah, so I go into detail about how the people arrived in which waves of migration, and then the development of their civilizations, which civilizations developed first, and then we have the year set up, which is before the rediscovery or before the remodernization, 1500. This is what the peninsula civilizations looked like. Arojanzan, which is where the Ojun language would eventually develop, which gradually expands, and over the course of many different wars and conflicts, colonizations, etc., the Ojun language eventually changes and blends a little bit with Faunal, but overall just takes over the peninsula and becomes the main language used. And I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on the history section, but basically the two civilizations, the main ones are the Arojanzans and the Faunals, and they kind of conflict with each other a lot over history. The Faunals, for most of the early history, were way more successful in most ways, like technology, wealth, etc. But eventually the tides kind of turned, and they tried joining into one unified state called Fuanarojun, but that didn't really work out, and they get conquered by this empire, Permexico, which like has a very similar language family or whatever. They don't really care about influencing the linguistic culture. Another group that takes them over just before that, the Princei, they do have a significant impact on the language. I'm going to get over to the map where the Princei show up. Where is it? So there's the Faunal Peninsula there. Fuanarojun. Then we have the Prince Conquest and Rule. We have this very big map here that shows the Prince Empire here, and pink comes in, and they basically do this big maritime takeover. They're a very powerful empire during the late 1200s or so. They come in, they do all kinds of changes. They introduce a a vocalic sound that is mostly incorporated into words relating to technology. They bring in a lot of new words that are mostly based on technology. They change the number system, which was originally base 12, but the Princei had a base 10 system, and they kind of forced that in. And now in the modern ojun language today, like a speaker, well, not today, but today in quotation marks, they would use a base 10 to talk about what is it? They talk about cardinal numbers using base 10, but they still use base 12 for a lot of their ordinal numbers. And I've got a whole section on numbers for that later, but that's just one of the many impacts of the Princei whenever they invade. Then eventually Paramachiko comes in, takes them over, blah blah blah. Yeah, so they become a Paramachican colony. Then they basically they basically declare independence one tribe at a time, and they unify themselves under one nation. They call it Eslefon, which means like the homeland of the Fwonks and the people with foreign ideas, because they, were proud of their identities being different from those of the Paramachicans and from other nations that have previously tried to take them over. So here in 1836 AR, this is what it looked like, the nation, and it eventually unified into one country. And then we come up to the modern time, and the modern time section is very much an abridged section of what happened, because most of the events in my childhood took place, in the year equivalents of what was happening here. So basically my whole childhood kind of happened from in these couple paragraphs right here, and everything else is like history that was added on. But I have a full website dedicated completely to all of the history that happened during that time period, all the main characters, all the political leaders, all the conflicts that they had, and all that. And so I could definitely write multiple books with the content that is included in just those 10 years or so, let alone all the thousands of years that happen in between. So so that's a basic overview of the history section. Now, the reason that I did all of this in general was because this whole yard model was so important to me, and eventually it got destroyed by my parents because they thought it made the yard look ugly after about 7 years of its existence, which, it kind of did, but of course there was a lot of content and a lot of potential still in there, so I swore to never let it go. Thanks, Mom. I sort of never let it go, and I just went for it. And here it is today as my honors thesis project. So I always wanted to make a language for it, but I never knew how to make a language because I didn't know anything about linguistics yet. When I was in 8th grade, I had just recently started learning Spanish, and I tried making a language then, but then I realized about halfway in that it was like exactly like Spanish, and I was like, I don't want it to be like Spanish, so I want it to be like more original than that, more well thought out. So I kind of stopped. And then senior year of high school, I began working on this a little bit. Thought it was pretty cool. I did a presentation in the language and blew everyone's mind, and they thought it was cool. And then I moved on, and then Ellie said that it could be a valid honors thesis, and I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to do that. And so ever since then, it has exponentially expanded into this very large book of content, which is very fun. So we have here the first main section relating to the actual contents of the language is the phonology. So the phonology, we have, this is how it's written out whenever you type in my special keyboard, all the sounds that they have. Where do we have it? Fully Latin keyboard. If you don't have that, there's a couple digraphs that you could replace the diacritics and other symbols that I have in there. But then most importantly, there's like the International Phonetic Alphabet, the phoneme consonant chart. So the sounds, we have pa, ba, ta, da, ka, la, cha, ja, fa, va, za, ta, ja, hua, ha, ha, sla, la, ra. Then we have ya, wa, and then mya. Yeah. So those are all the consonant sounds that we have, and I go into detail on every one of these, or just the main groups that share common traits, and I go into detail about what could cause them to sound different, like where it's where the different allophones of the phonemes can happen and what causes them, and I do that for every single one of them. Like we have P and B here, then we have ma, na, ma, mya, nya here, and I go into what happens whenever there's different combinations of them, and I refer to an epenthesis chart that happens later on about what could happen whenever vowels need to be epenthesized in between them. So we have this for all of them. The da has an effect on vowels, as in every time this da happens, a becomes more of an a, then when e becomes more of an e becomes more of an e becomes more of an so otonyum, atum, glata, dal. Yeah, and then it doesn't really affect a, u, or o, because they're already more backed. All these are the more front vowels experiencing backing. That's just an interesting factor of do. And then we have what else? Yeah, so we go through all these consonants, going through all of their various rules and things that can happen to them. Yeah, so we go through all that. Then we have the vowels, and these are the vowels as you would write them out in my keyboard, then as you would write them out if you need to use digraphs every now and then, which is how it originally was before I created the special keyboard for it. And then we have the IPA ones. So we have just the vowels E, A, E, A, U, and O. And then it has several diphthongs, mostly related to combinations of another vowel with E, where we have yi, ye, ya, you, yo, a, o, l, I, ow, we, we, wa, wo, woi, oi, oi, and o. Then I go into detail, not as much detail, but I just express the basic traits of these vowels that happen. Yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Then we have the writing system. So we have my romanization right here, which includes all these extra symbols that I already showed back up on the phoneme chart. But then these are all the ones that you could turn into digraphs if you need to, if you don't have my special keyboard, which I think I can make. Yeah, I've made it so that you can download it on the internet if you really want it, but I feel like I'm the only one who's really going to use that. But we'll see. Maybe it'll become super popular like Klingon or something. But yeah, then there's two writing systems that they use, which I go into in the history section of why they developed. So we have the Yiwichuchopetoj, which is the phonetic system right here, which is basically, it's just an alphabet that goes through every one of the phonemes that we have here, including some archaic ones that don't really exist anymore, but they did in earlier versions of the language. So that causes some spelling intricacies, but not too many. So there's just the whole alphabet. This is based on the alphabet that I created when I was 10 years old, and it was basically just a code that my friends and I would use to like write secret notes to each other in middle school and stuff. But it was the Casanocian alphabet, like it was what the people of Elfwan Casanosha wrote in. And then I wrote a couple example sentences written in ojun and then also in Yiwichuchopetoj. So we have Yinghumashlepetomin Tiantmithya, which is written like that. Vorara Yahi Suvim Takpenyaye, written like that. And Eyerefiyin Fohyachai, written like that. So again, this one's just really an alphabet, not too much to it. Then we have the Yuihujodarang, which is the eloquent system, which in the canon was created by the Fwanels because the Autojans in Jopetoj system was kind of taking over their style of writing, and they wanted to emphasize their separation from the culture of Autojun, so they created this. And to this day, it's still only used in like official documents and carved on buildings and stuff, but it exists and it's taught in some of the more Fwano regions of the peninsula today. But everyone uses Jopetoj, not everyone uses Jodarang. But this one, it's composed in more of a syllabary way. Every sound still has its own symbol, but these are combined, and like the initial sound is put on the bottom, while the initial consonant is put on the bottom. Then there's a nucleus that happens in between, which shows whether the vowel sound is palatalized or not, whether it's like just an ah or whether it's a ya. If it's just an ah, it's got kind of like a curve to it. If it's a ya, it's just a dot in the middle. And then above that, there will be the vowels placed on top. If there's two vowels, it'll just be two vowel symbols stacked on top of each other. And they kind of just are placed in a way that wraps around itself to increase the visual flow of how it looks. So there's just a couple sentences that are written. This one right here is the Jopetoj, and then above it and below it is the Jodarang system. I think it looks pretty cool. Yeah, so it's got traits of alphabet, but it's also stacked on top of each other for each set of words as if it was like a syllabary or something. Yeah, so I explain it a little bit right there. What else do we have? Then we have the numeral system. We have, what is it? So here's the original base 12 system that was used before the Princei conquest. It's all based on adding on to this one symbol right here. So you draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then for 12, you would go on to move to the square setup, where the tens place is a dot in the middle of the square, the hundreds place is a slash between the square, and X is in the thousands. And then it goes into more detail in the base 10 system that comes up next. But yeah, so this is what their numbers looked like before 1276. Then after, it was basically the same thing, except the Princei government, whenever they started education programs for their systems, just took off these last two dots and made people start over at 10. So it just went 1 through 9, then 10, and then there's the tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and then it goes to a circle for millions through hundreds of millions, following the same format. So those are the numbers right there. Yeah, cool. Then another thing we have the syllable structure. We have C, C, V, C, C, where there can be syllables including just a vowel, or it can be in any of these other formats, going from just like tao to fwonk. Yeah, so I go into detail about what can cause these here, where like C1 is only known to be represented with plosives, fricatives, and affricates, and it must be followed with ra, wa, or It can also be represented by any consonant if the following sound is ya, if that can be considered a consonant. Then we have C2 can be any consonant, C3 can be any consonant, C4 is only known to have been represented with ra and ka, and they can only occur when preceded by plosives, fricatives, and affricates. Yeah, so also pretty self-explanatory there. I do a brief section on syllable stress, where I talk about, just in certain grammatical contexts, words generally, not all the time, but generally have different stress patterns. And there's charts for each of the main types of words that go through here. And then we have the big section that includes like a lot of the content. We have the syntax and morphology section. Siadmanib, yijuh, wotim yujuh. So I have a key explaining what a lot of the abbreviations mean. And then I have another, like a guide to how the gloss elements worked over here, including all that. And then I go through one by one. The language is a verb, object, subject order. So yot mutao yao is he goes to that house. Naukum miechalk a is I gave food. Churamt enpe chujaj firjihya is I need to drink water right now. So we have like need is churam, drink the m with the accusative marker on it because that's something that happens whenever there's double verbs in Autojune. They put an accusative marker on the second verb because they know it's going to be preceding the actual object, which is chujaj, water, meaning some of it, firjihya. We have a set of conjunctions that can go, that can join together phrases, clauses, or both. We have two kinds of and. We have wu and wa. Wu is for joining noun phrases, adjectives, adverbs within the same clause, and wa is for joining two entire parallel clauses. Something that Ellie suggested to me, and I thought it was a good idea because there's definitely a difference here. Then we have tiji, which is for relating to durations of time or stretches of physical space. Inai, for relating to, because of, which is related to causation or immediate relation. And we within the same clause, ch. We have or, zu, but, zu. We have thus, therefore, because of, when joining two parallel clauses, is oko. We have in order to or so as to, when conjoining two clauses, bau. By means of, mo, which is just as equivalent to queva, when joining two clauses, is nyo. So I have a whole section on adverbs, where you can have adverbial phrases that can be at the beginning. There's ones where nyo is kind of a different one because nyo is related to any kind of time in general. So nyo used to be a much more of a grammatical function word than a content word in earlier forms of the language, but it eventually evolved to just relate to basically the phrase when in general. So it became something that instead of being stuck between the tense and the subject pronoun, those two blended together, and nyo just became a time marker. So when go to party, that, naukum miechalk, give food, I in the past did. So when I went to that party, I gave food. Yeah. What else do we have? And then we have just adverbs. Adverbs are signified usually with fe at the beginning of a root word. So like payah is happiness. Fe means it's an adverb that attaches to the word that comes before it. So adverbs, words that describe the verb, are placed after the verb. Then let's see if there's so I go into detail about all these things, talking about all the various positions that adverbs and adverbial phrases can have. More on just adverbial phrases in specific. Then we have subordinate clauses, which happen a lot in Autojune. A subordinate clause is a clause that includes a verb, a subject, and or an adverb, and it can be placed before the main clause of the sentence. The clause is marked as a subordinate by its verb endings. So there's several verb endings that define a subordinate clause as shown in the following table. Yeah, so we have the who, what, when, where, why, how, then the if, and then the is it so, which is more related to, if it's going to be a question or or a hypothetical. And then we have when, which implies that the direct object of the sentence is the entire following clause. Like if it's not any of these question words, then it's going to have when in it if it's got another clause following it within the same sentence. So another sentence right here. Yeroen yasuvim pekem yechao yue, which is yeroen, yerem, it is the verb like to know. Yeroen basically means that. That's what I have it in the gloss as, is that. So know that. Ya is I in the present. Suvim, want. Pekemiechao, sunrise food or breakfast. And then we have yue, present, second plural. So it's basically, I know that y'all want breakfast. Yero and yasuvim pekemiechao yue. And the when ending on verbs, due to bringing on this second clause as the object of the sentence, is a very common thing that happens in here. What else do we have? Yeah, so for conjoining clauses, we have all these, which I expressed in that prior table up there. Copulas. Copulas happen whenever the verb, what is it? If a clause operates only to describe the subject, a copular phrase can be used. In this situation, the pro word contains enough information for the verb to be deleted. Verbs such as aim, em, and juan can be deleted, and the copular clause can occur when there's no object of the sentence. So like this sentence here, detuch dochao yo, which detuch means the idea of something that is red or just redness. Then we have dochao is red clay, that's used for domes, and yo, we have that's just present third singular. Clay is red. So there's enough information contained within this yo right here, because it's present in third singular, that you don't really need to include one of these to be's or to happen like huam is. It just can kind of go without being said. It's not necessarily required. And similarly, something that is an adjective, like in this sentence 18 here, you're saying that this clay is red, but it's using redness like a noun. The jo can be removed from these types of sentences because they'll understand what you're talking about. They say there's a redness to this clay, basically. You could also say jo tetuch dochauka yo, which means the exact same thing, but you're just specifying with ka, which is the nominative marker, you're specifying that the clay is the subject. It's just something that they use to make emphasis of things. A second. But yeah, then we have noun phrases, how groupings of nouns happen. They can be linked together with wu, etc. We have adjectival phrases, whenever you have to combine sets of nouns. Dative phrases, whenever you have a dative noun that's put in between, like this sentence, Naukuma ne mekherao ruye, give ma means it's causing a change to something, or causing a change of possession or something like that. Nem is him in the dative case. Kherao is sword. Ru makes something a command, and ye is present singular, second. So give him the sword, give the sword to him. Naukuma nem kherao ru ye. Yeah. What else do we have? So yeah, accusative phrases. A good amount of information on how accusative phrases work within the sentence, as in whenever there's only one object, when there's one verb, one object, and one subject, a lot of times this pe ending will be dropped. Pe is usually the accusative marker, but it doesn't always need to be there. The pe is usually on there to specify that something is an object if you can't really get it out of the context. So in modern Auto-June, the language is mostly, it's closer to analytic than synthetic. It's kind of a mix in between. It went through two periods. In its proto-language form, it was very synthetic. Then it gradually became pretty analytic, and then it went through another wave of becoming synthetic again during the Prince Conquest times. And then it's gradually lost that to the point where these direct object nouns don't always even need to have their ending on them, but they do whenever you have other grammatical parts in it for specification. So you could either say for he goes to that house, yot mutauch yao, or yot mutauch pe yao. It just, it depends on how much you want to specify, or the flow of the sentence, depending on the stress order and all that. What do we have?
Robbie, you don't need to go through everything. So maybe wrap up and sort of start saying some things in conclusion.
All right, cool.
Yeah?
Yeah, the morphology, I go through basically all the allomorphs and all the morphemes, all the conjugations for all the subjects and objects and all that. Here's the epenthesis table, blah blah blah. I go into all the noun endings that happen for the various people. What else do we have? Yeah, so there's many tables for all the allomorphs and morphemes for different words and word endings. More of that. Then what do we have? Linguistic change over time. I show like the proto-language and everything that goes into it. The numbers and counting. So I show all of the base 10 and base 12 counting systems that go on for it. What else? The calendar and time telling. I show how all the years and months and days work, blah blah blah. What year it is, how that year is equivalent to our year. The names, all the various names of people, like the most common 100 or so names. I created a full music system for it too. How people would write music, how it would translate, etc. And then I have a section for all the traditions, religions, and attitudes. The main religious phrase that we have is yak, ah, wa, which is just I in the present, I in the past, and I in the future, along with yok, all, and wo, which is it now, it in the past, and it in the future. It's all just part of their religion, which is Bezism. Then we have the ojun, the English dictionary, which is, literally just a big dictionary that goes through everything, every single thing. What else do we have? So I do all that, and this one is showing ojun words if you want to translate them to English, but then that's not entirely useful if you're an English speaker, so I made an English to ojun dictionary, which goes through all that whenever you're starting from the English perspective, going in alphabetical order, and then we have roots in case you want to create your own words. That takes us down to the sample text for all the TV shows, scenes, and stuff that I converted into the language for the Agma Schwa YouTube channel and all that, which is fun. More texts, more example texts. Then we have the common colloquial phrases, showing someone who wants to learn the language how they would have a basic conversation. And all the various slang and vulgarity and the bad words and stuff that you could say, which is fun. Various other abbreviations and everything else. And then conclusion, which is just like, thanks to everyone, blah, blah, blah. So, in conclusion, this language has been really just a huge part of the past year, and the entire culture of it has been a part of my entire life so far. So, I'm very glad that, everything went well and functioned properly, and I am very excited to get it nice and published into a book and finished, and I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. There we go.
Thank you, Robbie. There I went again. Great job. Normally we clap, but it's hard to do.
Yeah.
I did a clap reaction.
Yeah.
Like that. But, the reaction, yes.
Great.
So what we'll do is ask Bob and Catherine, whoever would like to jump in first. Catherine, maybe because of the phonology is first, or Bob, the history, it doesn't matter.
Either way. Do you have a preference, Bob?
No, I don't. You can go ahead.
All right, I'll go ahead. Let's see. All right, yeah. So my main question with our phonology, I wonder, are the phonological rules, the phonotactics, the syllable structure, the allomorphy, the allophony, is that emergent? Like, did you sort of come up with a language whose sound you liked, and then you sort of interrogated yourself and said, "Oh, what kinds of allophones have I created? What kinds of syllable structure has emerged from this process?" Or was it sort of like uh, or were there some aspects of it that were sort of prospective, like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if the language had a phonological rule like this, and so I will introduce this? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're talking about. So basically, what is it? I originally wanted the phonology to. At first, whenever I was like, back in high school, I was like, okay, the main thing that I want is it needs to have an M-yay, like an M with a tilde on it. That was my first thing. Everything else, I was like, okay, I'll do whatever. And then, but then I started looking into like, Old English and Navajo, and I liked some of the sounds that they had. So I kind of, originally came up with some of the ideas for that. The phonology itself, based on a lot of the sounds, like the lateral sound that Navajo has, the Schwa that happens in Old English, etc. And I kept the MA because I had to keep the MA. So that's where the basis of it came from, was kind of like a combo of English, or at least Old English, with some Navajo sounds, and then plus a few other sounds that I just thought would, be cool in it. But then with the rules that went with it, those kind of developed as I was trying to say the sounds. Because I would write all these example sentences and things, and then I would try and pronounce some things, and I'd realize that some things were more difficult for my tongue than others. And then I had to slightly separate myself from that and say, like, hey, my tongue ain't perfect, but like, so I looked at some of those sounds, especially with the combinations of nasal sounds. I was like, these things here, they wouldn't want to have two nasal sounds together. That's just something that I don't think would fit in with the way the language flows with other things that are going on with it. So so I made it so that if certain nasals are next to each other, the non like if two nasal consonants are together, the non-bilabial one will be deleted. If two of them are palatal, the non-palatal one will be deleted. If the two of them are M and M, the M will be deleted, etc. So a lot of these rules just happened because I was listening to myself, because I was making all those the scene translations from TV shows and stuff, and I was listening to all those sounds that were happening, and I was saying, like, okay, I'm hearing how I'm actually coming out with these sounds that I've written down. So these rules are things that exist for me, who is the closest equivalent to an actual native speaker, considering it's fictional. So I figured that I would go along with my instinct of a lot of these rules as to how they would function.
Okay. All right, thanks. Sort of a related question then is the stress system. So your stress system would be typologically unusual for human languages, or like contemporary human languages that we know about. So I was just wondering about your kind of motivation for that particular stress pattern.
That one also, let me scroll down to it real quick. Where is it? Yeah, so for these ones, I also spent a long time, like, really just listening to myself saying words and sentences. And I would literally, like, again, I would listen to these, like, scenes that I would record, or I would write down sentences in my notebook or something. And I would pay attention to exactly where the stress was landing, depending on what part of speech they were and stuff, because and again, like, I'm sure these rules aren't entirely universal. Like none of the stress rules are universal in English either. But I would basically
English is a
listen to my-
special case.
yeah, English is a special case, and so can ojun be. I definitely just listened to all these recordings, and I would mark down the stress of every syllable that I was doing in these sentences.
Okay.
And then the most common results of all these things, and there was no way I was gonna go past 6 syllables because I would only have like one example for each of those.
Sure.
But like that's how it would work whenever I'd listen to them.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, if we had all day, I would ask a follow-up question then about the difference between like verbal and nominal morphology that might lead to that difference in stress pattern, but it's not crucial to address that right now. All right. I mean,
about that some other time.
if you want, yeah. But thank you. Yeah, I have all kinds of questions, but I'll let somebody else go.
Maybe we can take turns. So, Bob, would you like to go?
Yeah, a couple of questions. This language that you've developed in your fictional history takes 2 million years. Is that right?
Well, no. The language only develops over the course of, and the proto language in this situation occurred around what is it in like around 4000 BR, so like 6,000 years before the present. It's like it takes place, like humans basically kind of get wiped out or almost wiped out in the past, and then these survivors just kind of like they slightly evolve and just come into existence around this time.
Okay, I guess I misunderstood that. I thought that humans were wiped out, and then dogs survived with human DNA, and they eventually, over the period of 1 million years, evolved into sort of quasi-humans.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so there's a huge expanse of time. If you were able to plug this into a existing language tree, what language tree would that be?
As in, like, what would it have like the most similarities with in terms of language family tree?
Yeah, is it Finno-Ugric or Indo-European or?
It was definitely inspired for the most part by Indo-European, right? Obviously, the language itself and the language family itself is, unrelated. But whenever I was thinking of how the tree would diverge and stuff, I was definitely inspired by, like, how Indo-European developed and split off into its branches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I have some follow-up questions on that. You talk about pronoun tense.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
page 91. Can you elaborate that a little bit?
Yeah, basically every at the end of every sentence where the subject is held, there's one word that contains the tense and the person who is doing the action. Like ya, the ya means it's in the present tense. The a means I. So it's like, so ya is I in the present. Wa is I in the future. Ka is I in the past. And it goes that way for every person that there is. I think I've got the chart for it somewhere in here.
Page 92.
Yeah,
92? Yeah.
Or at least it's below that.
Oh yeah, it's slightly after that, I think. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So we have what is it? So we have ya, ka, wa, ye, ke, we, yao, kao, wow, yaik, ai, wai, yok, o, wo, also yok, o, wo, ya, kea, wea, yo, kio, wio, yo, kio, wio, yu, ku, wu, and yue, kue, we.
So if you have pronouns marked for tense, then you don't need to mark the verb in the sentence for tense?
Yeah, there's no tense marking in any of the verbs.
Okay. So that's a distinguishing characteristic.
Yeah, definitely. That is an important characteristic of it. Yeah, the verbs that happen in the beginning of the sentence, there's nothing but the content and its ending depending on what kind of verb it is.
Okay.
So
And then word order is distinguishing as well. And what about the two plurals? Can you say something about that? And I'll hand it over to Ellie.
Um,
I just had a follow-up on your question on the pronoun conjugation. Because
oh yeah.
to me, that seems more like an auxiliary. If you're marking something that is past or present for first or second person, that means it's a tense auxiliary. And
Interesting. Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Languages like English has have or am for certain auxiliaries. So I've always, and then it fits with your copula story as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's a minor footnote.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I've always had a difficulty in naming this concept. So if it's an auxiliary part of speech, then yeah, go ahead with that. I've always been debating between calling it just like a pronoun or a pro word or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, there are precedents for that. But yeah. Right.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, like, yeah, Ellie's right. I've seen them called auxiliaries.
Yeah. And then, Bob, what was your second question? I forgot.
I forgot it too. Oh, why are there two plurals? Can you say something about that?
Well, I don't think that there are two plurals, actually. There used to be, there's another conjugation table where there used to be, like, a dual conjugation.
Well, you have plural inclusive and plural exclusive.
Oh, those two types of plurals. Yeah, yeah. So those ones are those ones are, the inclusive one. This is literally the combination of I and you. So, like, it's a you and I plural, like we, including you. Meanwhile, we have la tawa, which is I and they, meaning, like, we but not you. And that is used for first person plurals and second person plurals. Yeah, that one, I was definitely very happy to include those because I thought it was really cool considering English speakers have such issues with determining whether the we is including you or not.
Right.
That happens, yeah.
Okay.
Alright, cool.
So I have a quick question on your beginning of your syntax section.
Alright.
And in my version, it's page 80, but it's like here.
The key?
Yeah, here. Just below that.
Ellie, I can't hear you. I think you got muted.
Okay. You have conditionality, and later on you have indicativity. So would you say that both of those are kind of more mood-like?
Yeah.
Then under indicativity, you have imperfect, which is more aspect. So that leads to a question. Your language, to me, seems like a tense, really tense-focused language because of this auxiliary.
Yeah.
You see the mood and the aspect, because you usually think of a language, is it a tense or a mood or an aspect language? So could you say a little bit more about that, how you've chosen these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories?
Yeah. So, let's see. So these ones that I have in this example word right here that's on the screen, we have nya koem yehi, where we have nya as a separate word, where nya and ru are both, they're definitely both more, the moods, right? The moods are there as separate words. They're detached from the main, like, tense auxiliary here that includes all this other information. I would definitely consider those to be more moods. But I just called it conditionality because it's something that's uncertain. Like, you don't know, even if you're commanding someone to do something, you don't know whether that thing's going to happen or not. So,
But that's what mood does. Mood says, is it real or not?
yeah, exactly.
So I think maybe you could do 1 is mood, and then 4 could be aspect with the imperfect. But there isn't very much imperfectivity. You've just sort of modeled that a bit on English and possibly on Spanish, I think.
Yeah, that is definitely inspired on Spanish a little bit.
Right, that's just a comment about the typology of your language. Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That imperfect in quotation marks, that's definitely inspired by how Spanish works with its with like superaba or something like that. Yeah, and then the he could also be schla or nothing or chai, depending on whether it's certain, uncertain, or something surprising that has actually happened in reality. I think, yeah, I have that, and I have that written as verity, and I like that word verity. I don't know if there's a more
Actually, polarity is probably the better term, but you can use verity here.
All right, cool.
It's the imperfect that is kind of a strange bedfellow with the indicative, is what I...
Okay, cool.
And, yeah. Catherine, do you want to sort of just circle, and then in about 10 minutes we'll open it to the other members of your audience.
Sure.
All right, cool.
Let's see. Yeah, so one thing that's not entirely clear from the discussion of the phonology and the morphophonology, since they're kind of in separate places, and also they're not really stated in terms of natural classes. Like it's like your epenthesis table, for example, is like these segments epenthesize this, and these segments epenthesize this. But I wonder if there are more general statements that could be achieved, like these manners or places of articulation undergo epenthesis in this way, and these manners or places or whatever undergo in this way. And sort of relatedly, I also wonder about a lot of the morphophonology. Are those are the variants of the morphemes meant to sort of be in variation according to general principles of the phonology, or are they sort of like morpheme specific allomorphy? So like in one case, I think there's a consonant and vowel effect. Like if the stem ends in a vowel, or if it ends in a consonant, you get a different allomorph suffix or something. But I don't think you mentioned like a general preference for codas or general avoidance of vowel. Yeah, that's what I mean. A general avoidance of like vowel hiatus. So yeah, I just wondered if you have thoughts about like the phonological system as a system rather than as the individual phonemes and morphemes undergoing separate processes. And I don't know to what extent like this generates, like, it's up to you. You may have a lot to say about that, or you may not have much to say, and either way is fine. I just wondered if you did have any more to say about it.
No, I kind of do, actually, and I'm realizing that I probably didn't actually write it in the book, but it might be still on my Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
But generally, for most of these, I don't really explain why on the epenthesis table, but I do in the Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
I just like forgot to mention that in the book part. I could do that, in my little final revision or whatever. But basically, kind of the further back in the mouth that these sounds are related, the syllable, the vowel that comes after them is changed. So usually if you're anywhere other than like the wa and the hua, because those also involve like a movement of the lips a little bit, even though, you know, it's still, they're technically like labiovelar. It's a weird position on the diagram, but like these guys are all on the left third of the IPA chart, right? And then over here, these guys are more towards the middle third that get the ah for their epenthesis. Just ya gets the o, and then k, h, ch, and kla, the further back, more the further back fricatives and plosives get the oo. It was generally designed based on like how front or back in the mouth that it was meant to be. Yeah, but I could write that down.
Yeah, and it's also a kind of, once you write it in terms of natural classes, it brings up some other kinds of questions like why is front versus back for consonants predictive of high versus low for vowels? Like how are those dimensions related? I notice you also have the nasal and the oral plosives in like taking different vowels, even though they're both like alveolar or dental or whatever they are. Like the N and the T take different vowels, even though, are they different places of articulation in your system?
Probably slightly, but I also probably didn't go into that much detail about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's okay. I mean, one thing that I'm going to suggest is that the stuff on the phonological generalization should really be stated in IPA or some phonetic transcription that's easily referenceable, because otherwise I have to learn the orthography to see what the phonological generalizations are. That's more of a challenge.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, may I follow up on that? I had the same feeling. I couldn't figure out how ah, which is a low back vowel, can be anything farther forward in the mouth than mid. So how do you pronounce your low front ah?
Which one here? So
in your table of front, mid, and back vowels, you have
generally it's
page 63.
Yeah, generally it's more similar to hang on a second, let me get to it. Yeah, so the ah used to, it definitely used to be well, what's that? Brandy, could you mute your microphone real quick? There we go. Yeah, it used to definitely be ah. It was more of the ah with like the ash symbol. And then it's gradually become more of an ah. Whenever it comes after the th symbol, it becomes more of a thaw. So it gets backed from being an ah to an aw. But it definitely is somewhere between an ah and an ah in this context.
Okay.
Yeah.
And could we go back to the epenthesis tables as well? There seem to be an awful lot of epenthetic vowels going on in your language.
Yeah. I'll page that on again.
Which I found to be striking. That could be another distinguishing feature. Epenthesis is that frequent in English. I can only think of one instance, athletics.
There we go.
But can you explain to me why there are so many instances of epenthesis in your language?
It doesn't actually happen super often. It happens whenever roots are being blended together and their consonants don't want to go next to each other, or if there's a noun ending that, like a noun ending for an object or a noun ending for a concept, and those sounds, they morphologically they want to have their own like syllable dedicated to it. So if the root ends in a consonant, then it's going to need to have that vowel following it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you could explain that.
Okay, yeah.
Just briefly.
like where do we have it? So say in, let's go over to the dictionary real quick. Let's see. So basically for most of the for most nouns, right? For concept nouns, they have the h sound that follows it to signify that it's a consonant, but that can also be removed if the last if the last consonant of the word is something other than na or ra. So that doesn't really apply. Hang on a second, let me check. Hang on. Yeah. Well, okay. I'll just try and explain it. Like there's certain noun endings, right? Like if it's a physical noun, like it's ehau is the largest ending that it can have, but it can also be uhau, ahau, ahau, depending on whether or not the consonant that comes before it is, say, like if it's a T, if it's any kind of plosive, I would say it usually needs to be followed with another vowel before it goes on to the how, or it can just, or that all can be removed and it can be an ow. It just it's, or if there's like two roots that are next to each other and those roots don't fit in with the syllable structure that happens earlier up in the phonology section. Because if a lot of these roots, some of the roots end with vowels, some of the roots end with nouns, and not nouns. It's some of the roots end with consonants. So if these consonants are ones that fit in with the syllable diagram, right? So how it says C4 is only known to be represented with ra and ka. They can only occur when preceded by plosives, fricatives, and affricates, whatever. Like, if these things, if the or the ka, or if any of these other consonants that happen, if they're followed up, if the root that's being placed after it is something that isn't compatible with it, as however the consonant section in the phonology describes it, then it's gonna have to get the epenthesis put in between it.
Okay. Now
Okay. Yes, Bob, did you have a follow-up?
Just one final question, but we're getting close to the end, aren't we?
Well, I was going to open it up to the audience because there are quite a number of
Let's do that. It's their turn.
So, dear audience, who would like to ask the first question?
Anyone?
Don't be shy.
I do have one question.
Yeah?
So I don't know if I just missed this or not, but I was wondering how tone factors into the language and maybe how that affects the music system.
Oh. Well, there's no the tone doesn't necessarily change the definition of any words, right? It's not there's no like tonemes or any of that. But are you talking about like the syllable stress, or are you talking about the literal tone in the music system?
A little of both. So just like, for instance, in English, we have tones that don't define words, but they do define like how, like I'm not a linguist, but like, like whether it's a question or an answer, things like that.
Oh yeah. Well, we have in ojun we have question, the little question ending that goes on the tense auxiliary. We have if it's a question, you'll end the sentence with chai, and that chai will have the emphasis in that syllable. So they'll say, like, if you wanted to say, "What are you talking about?" you say "Hakabana ye chai." So that chai will definitely get a lot of the emphasis, way more than the yeah that comes before it. It makes it obviously, since there's a literal sound related to making something a question, the chai is any kind of question or uncertainty, but that chai having its emphasis makes it so that most of the sentence leading up to it kind of all lands on the chai. Yeah. Relating to the music though, I made a couple songs in Auto-June, and one of them is on the channel. And in it, there's a few times where questions are mentioned, and I make sure that the chai is on one of the more stressed beats in the song, right? Yeah. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
All right. Cool. Very nice.
Anyone else?
I have a quick questions.
Yeah.
I'm an amateur Conlanger and amateur linguist, but I'm interested in that to create a full grammar for a language, do you start focusing on a specific site, say pronoun or phonology, or do you probably start very broadly to try to account for everything? And then, so would you do top down or bottom up? That's
Well, considering this has happened over a long course of time for me, I kind of started out taking it from a few different angles. Originally, at first, I made it so that everything in the sentence that could possibly be specified was like had its own grammatical marker or whatever, and it was really weird looking. So I tried starting it from the bottom up. I would probably recommend starting top down. Like start by saying like, okay, it's verb, object, subject, and then think of, okay, where do the adverbial phrases go? Where do the adjectives go, etc. Is the word order super important, or is it synthetic? Like I think after all the stress that I put myself through, I would recommend going from like a top down approach.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Emily has a question, I think.
Yeah.
Hello. Sorry. So once again, I'm not a linguist. I'm a Conlanger. But my question is, what kind of what's the word? What kind of like poetry does the Arjun people like the most? Like, I think this is just like a rumor I heard once before, but because Japanese people like involuntarily tend to rhyme in the language. Rhyming is not that particularly popular in like traditional Japanese poetry. Is there like some kind of similar thoughts you're given to like Arjun poetry in that kind of way? Like what kind of linguistical play do they like the most, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, in Auto-June, it's really easy to rhyme, considering most of the time you're ending the sentence with ya if you're talking about yourself, or ye if you're talking in second person. Like, every phrase or sentence that you say is gonna end with one of those tense auxiliaries. It's gonna end with the content of what's happening at what time and who's doing it. So if you're doing like a poem that's in first person, like you're talking about your own experiences, then it's basically every sentence will end with ya. Or if you're talking about like a natural phenomenon, then every sentence will end with yo or ko or wo. So it's really easy to rhyme with that, and then also considering the first words of the sentence are going to all generally have like a verb ending on them, and if they like grammatical rhyming, as in they'll like the same types of verbs happening, the just like parallel types of sentences happening in rows. That's how I tried to write it whenever I wrote the Vodara Ya poem, is they like to keep like syllable count moderately important to them, making sure that the sentences kind of grammatically parallel the previous or in certain sets. That's really the most important thing, because like rhyming just kind of happens accidentally for them.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Someone else?
I have a little question.
Yes.
It seems like you have like a lot of pretty unique structures. Like you said, you have verb, object, subject, which is a little strange right there.
Mm-hmm.
And you definitely have like a lot of palatalization just everywhere, like a lot of feeler fricatives and whatnot. It sounds real funky and stuff. And so I was kind of wondering, like, artistically, like, what were you trying to achieve with this language? Like, obviously, this is the culmination of like your life's like fantasy world. Like, it's a very, like big thing, like personally for you, but like artistically with the language, was there any like overriding like theme or like vision you were trying to make with it?
I mean, the vision that I was generally thinking of it was like, how can this language, it so I was thinking of it mostly through the lens of the culture of the Faunal Peninsula that I've had already developed. Like, they have, the way I kind of thought of it is, if medieval society, like if medieval Europe or something had modern, like semi-modern technology, like if the culture of the 1200s had the technology and the interconnectedness of like the 1950s, that's kind of like the vibe that it was going for. So I wanted the language to kind of reflect that in a way that it there's some aspects of it that sound really smooth that you can make slang out of really easily, so that people can have like quick conversations and make puns and make jokes and stuff really easily. Like, I've always been super impressed with like how English can just bend words and create new words and just cause so many other things to like blend into each other and stuff. So I thought the including a lot of palatal sounds and a lot of fricatives would help make it so that you could make things sound nice and like slippery whenever they need to. But then I also added in like a lot of back sounds, like a lot of ha ha gla, and some of those back sounds, because I figured that it would kind of balance it out, make some hard syllables to kind of contrast with that. And again, like, the phonology was again like originally intended to be kind of like inspired by a combo of like Old English and Navajo, but then also with some other additions into it. So I figured, like, how do I make it so that they can quickly create slang and have a good time with their words and do wordplay and stuff, while also like preserving like a certain kind of intensity that they would need to still be like a warfare related people. Like their word for peace literally translates to like a time in between wars. So like I wanted to make sure that it stayed rather intense, while still allowing for like the general populace to have fun with the language.
Thank you. So I think maybe we'll wrap it up, unless there's an other really urgent question by someone.
So I was going to ask, with this process, the whole process of making this language, what was the most disappointing event that happened, and how did you go around that?
The most disappointing event.
Most disappointing.
I would say probably like the most disappointing thing was kind of like right from the start, because I'd already created all these names for locations and characters and stuff, over the course of my childhood. But these names, a lot of the names sounded quite Englishy, right? They were very English names, and a lot of like their original spellings were spellings that only an English speaker who was 7 years old would make. So I knew whenever I was creating it right from the start that I wouldn't be able to call it just literally just Elfwant Casanosha. It ended up becoming Eslefon Casanosha to fit in with the actual phonology. But my goal from the start was like, I'm gonna try and at least make the place names, of like Arojanza or Arojun, Fwan, Fwan, and Elfwan Casanosha, Eshlefon Casanoslia. I wanted to make those as the at least change as possible whenever going from the original names to what the people would actually be calling them. But some of them, it was a bit harder of a transition, but it definitely all works beautifully with the aesthetics of it now. It's still just weird to think about, considering I've called a lot of the names that I would call them in English through my childhood had like L's in them, and there's no la in Auto-June. It has to be replaced with like with a wa or a hla, depending on what part of the word it's in. And yeah, so that was definitely the most disappointing part, but I'm pretty much over it now. I like it.
Well, we're glad you're over it. Thank you so much. You did a wonderful job explaining everything in your
Thank you.
presentation, but also in the question. So what we'll do now is excuse you and the audience. So if the audience and you could get off at the moment. And thank you, audience. That was wonderful. So many of you coming to enjoy what Robbie had to say. And now the committee will actually deliberate a little bit, and then I'll email you, Robbie, when you should come back in. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank all of you, thank you all for watching. Good times. All right. Off we go. I'll see y'all later. All right. That went pretty well. I was getting a little stressed out in the middle part, but we did it. And that's a pretty long recording. But honestly, because this is like the finale, I don't really care how many views it gets. I just, it's gonna be on there in all of its glory. The fun parts, the awkward parts, the legend, it all worked out. So, this is Nguh signing off. Auto-June pretty much done. I'm still gonna do some things with it, but you know. All right, goodbye.